by Hot Shots. St. Louis is home for all the games all the time since 1990. Find yours. It's hotshotsnet.com. And, of course, all programming here on STL Sports Hub is brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Stefan, Caray, Brendan, Schaeffer. A really tough loss for the Cardinals tonight. I'll be curious to see how the fans react to this one. 5-4, the Mets walk it off thanks to a Francisco Lindor home run in the bottom of the ninth. Not for lack of trying, the Cardinals put up a good fight. Brendan Donovan had 2 hits, extended his hitting streak to 14 games, including a game-tying home run in the top of the 9th inning. But again, we've talked about it all season long. It's about winning the winnable games, and the Cardinals have not done that, especially against teams in the National League. Brendan, I just want to get your initial thoughts after that loss. A really tough one. Felt like a game you needed to win tonight.
Yeah, Stefan, I'm sure we won't have any comments tonight with folks chiming in on that one. That one, I put it in the title. It's a heartbreaker that the Cardinals end up losing in Queens because you fought back and you had an opportunity. Brendan Donovan gifting that to the Cardinals with his home run off the foul pole. Really, at that moment, you're thinking, okay, just find any way to maybe push this thing over the edge, and they couldn't do it. You go into the 9th inning with your setup man, and he gives it up to the first batter. I tell you what, when this weekend is over, the Cardinals will be glad to not have to see Francisco Lindor's face for a little while. He was a menace against him yesterday, and again tonight he comes through with the death blow as the Mets walk it off. It just, I'll tell you, from TV, it seemed really like Citi Field had the energy tonight, and sometimes it gets late, and then you get into a late inning situation in a building where you can feel it through your television that there is a buzz in the ballpark, and I said, oh, boy, it just was a gut feeling, Stefan, that I thought, even with the Cardinals battling back the way that they did, I wasn't sure they were going to find a way to get through that 9th inning with Ryan Fernandez. And sure enough, it didn't take long for Lindor to put an end to it.
Well, he certainly leaned on that baseball, but a positive outlook for the Cardinals. Miles Mikolas looked very, very good tonight. 4 2/3, 5 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, and a strikeout. You take away that Boston start on April 6th, he has an 0-1 record, but a 3.71 ERA. And I think that Mikolas has something to prove a little bit to this fan base and to this team. He executed tonight, unfortunately, was not rewarded with a Cardinals win. The Cardinals now 2 games below 500. You get the feeling that they need to win the next 2, or at least find a way to get something going. You don't want to spiral out of control with the way the rest of this division is playing over the last couple of days.
Yeah, I thought for a while this afternoon that maybe the Cubs were going to gift you one because of how many runs they gave up in 1 inning to Arizona, but the wind was blowing out at Wrigley, and then the Cubs in the bottom of that 8th inning took advantage themselves and managed to fight back to win that one. So Cardinals lose a little ground in the division. You're still looking at that road record going, man, I know it's early, but you're 1-7 now in road games if you're the Cardinals, and it doesn't get any easier. I mean, you have some tough pitching that you faced the last couple of nights, and it's going to be the same story tomorrow and Sunday. And then you go to Atlanta and say, okay, maybe Atlanta's a team that's a bit down on its luck early, except for check a little closer. They played poorly on the road as well, but they get to play this one at home at Truist Park. And so the Cardinals, I mean, no rest for the weary. It's going to be a little bit tough to find where they get the momentum from if they don't create a little bit of it offensively. I know we'll talk about the pitching. We've got some comments about Miles Mikolas. Get your comments in, by the way, to the live chat. All you got to do is hit the subscribe button on Sports Hub STL, and then you will be eligible to immediately comment with your thoughts on this game. We'll talk about Miles. We'll talk about, I think there is a conversation to be had about Fernandez or Helsley. Which Ryan do you go with there in the 9th inning is definitely a topic that folks are talking about in the live chat. But I want to focus first, Stefan, on the offense. This is a Cardinals team that came into today. I believe they've been averaging 5 runs per game for the season. That's their average. The problem is they've had too many of the games where they don't really score as many runs. They score 8 or 9, they score 7, and then they have those days where they score 2, they score 1, they might get shut out. So the median might not be quite as strong as the average there of 5 runs a game. And tonight was an example where they did ultimately get to that number 4. It took them a while to do it, and then they didn't get an opportunity to get any more than that because they gave up their 5th run in the bottom of the 9th. So the offense, I feel like, got close tonight. You saw the fight from them, but it's a solo homer by Donovan. It's small rallies, I suppose. They weren't really able to break through with that big crooked number that can really turn a game on its head. And maybe, Stefan, that's what they'll be looking for the rest of the weekend. I just think it's tough against the starters they're going to face from New York.
Well, as you know, moral victories are very different than regular victories, and they have not been showing up on the box scores for the Cardinals in a lot of these close games. They've lost 6 games by 2 or less runs. 4 of those 6 have been by 1 run. and the Cardinals really could have a completely different looking season if they finished off teams later in the game. This is a team that's very, very talented, certainly, especially in the NL East, which is one of the better divisions in all of baseball. They're competing. They have a really talented lineup, and the Cardinals getting 2 games where you hold them to 4 runs. You'd like to see this potent offense going out and taking at least one of those 2. It just didn't happen tonight. But one of the stories I want to stick with is Brendan Donovan, 14-game hitting streak, continuing to be a revelation for the Cardinals. But this is a streak of games, a stretch of games outside of that Philadelphia series where the Cardinals are kind of tumbling a little bit. This effort isn't necessarily going to waste, but it's not necessarily showing up as wins in the box score for the Cardinals.
Yeah, and I think the combination of just seeing a little bit less offense, I really do feel like they're missing Ivan Herrera. He was really providing some good thump for the lineup, and they just don't have the consistent slug maybe at this point to be able to put up those crooked numbers. I mean, credit Brendan Donovan. That's a home run. That counts off the foul pole. It's a big-time swing, but not maybe enough of that. And you just look at the margins. I think they're really slim right now. Miles Mikolas, you mentioned, he did look better tonight. Still can't get through the 5th inning in this case. He goes 4 2/3. I think it was the right call by Ollie to take him out when he did, because you're talking about the 3rd time through. You're talking about Winker coming up. That's a guy that kills him. And you want to try to set up a better matchup than that. But it means a little bit more shoulder to the bullpen. And so could that be part of the reason that Ollie makes the choice to go with Fernandez over Helsley when the game remains tied? Perhaps you're typically going to be trying to save your closer for the save situation when you're on the road. But, of course, you may not get to that situation. I'm sure they would have liked to have had a 10th inning with Ryan Helsley available, and you can say, hey, score your Manfred man, score your ghost runner in the top of the 10th, and then leave it to Helsley. But the problem was they didn't get to that situation. So there's a lot of frustration I see in the comments when it comes to the pitching situation. I really do appreciate what Brendan Donovan did, Stefan, and it's a shame that we're not able to focus more about that, because we start to think about, oh, man, the margins that they lost this game by, rather than the heroics that almost got them over the top in a win.
And the one thing that you could say about Brenden that he wasn't doing a ton is hitting the long ball. Well, he stepped to the plate in the top of the 9th inning and did just that. Do you get the feeling this team is missing a little bit of slug? A lot of the other teams in Major League Baseball, maybe not a lot, but a good amount of teams in Major League Baseball seem to have a lineup that is able to drive the ball over the wall a little bit more than the Cardinals have been. Now, that hasn't necessarily been something that has plagued this team, but you'd really like it in those situations where you're tied or down by 1, like we saw in the top of the 9th. Hasn't happened with a lot of frequency for the Cardinals this season.
Yeah, and that was a moment where it did, so you try to give credit where it's due. The Cardinals are around the middle of the pack in terms of home runs this season. And again, their overall numbers, I think, are maybe better than what it feels like, because you look up and you see the record, 2 games below 500. They do rank 8th in MLB in slug, but I feel like a lot of that was really, I do tie it around to the Ivan Herrera injury. You had a more robust slugging percentage before that point in time. They're still getting it in fits and starts. Today was a case where they get a little bit of it, but not enough to push them over the hill. They can push that boulder to the very top of that hill, but then to be able to roll it over the other side, they weren't able to do that. So, we'll see. You're going to win some games 4-1. The Cardinals had a win like that this week over the Houston Astros. You're going to lose some games 4-1. That was the case last night. It's those 5-4 games. You got to find a way to be on the upside of those more often than not. And when you add it up to, okay, it's now a consistent thing going on when you're in road games. You're 1-7. How do you find a way? Like, that's a mental blockade that I feel like the Cardinals have the talent to get over, and they're close in a lot of these cases. But it has been alarming to an extent, the amount of one-run games or just close games late that they haven't been able to handle. The extra inning situations have not gone their way. You had a couple against the Angels. The one that really sticks out to me was in Pittsburgh, the getaway day 13-inning game, where they had a couple of occasions where they could have scratched across a run and just weren't able to do it. And so you lose on those slim margins. And I do think with a team that we know has got the lower payroll, and so maybe not quite as much star power, at least in the case of proven stars, you've got a couple. One of them, though, is Wilson Contreras, who is obviously going through a tough time to begin the season, and you're still waiting for him to come around. But when you have those slimmer margins, inherently, it's going to take everybody's effort in these close games to try to find a way to put them over the top. And really, I think you can isolate that to being the difference compared to last year when they did finish a handful of games above 500. This year, they're a couple of games below as we sit in mid-April, and it's those close games that have really swung the difference.
And it's not a surprise that they're going to play in a lot of close games. Last year's team played in their fair share of one-run ball games, and this team is similar to the 2024 squad. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to see a whole lot more of those types of contests. You'd like to see them on the receiving end of some victories rather than losses. But that brings me to the next point, and I think a lot of people will have a magnifying glass on this one, is Ryan Fernandez brought in the bottom of the ninth. Do you think that Ollie Marmol was thinking a little bit about how this team has struggled in extra innings? You said it. It's a game of momentum. You said this before the show started. You felt like the momentum swung back in favor of the Cardinals after that Donovan home run. You think that he thought Fernandez could get it done, and then you're playing for the win in extra innings with Helsley. What's the thought process there?
That's probably part of the thought process, and I'll be curious to see some quotes from Ollie after it's all said and done. If folks are watching and hearing from him on the post game on TV as they watch us, feel free to let us know what's going on there. But I just think it's one of those things where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, because we've seen cases where Ollie has, at least at home, and I understand difference between home and road in these circumstances, is that you can potentially later have a save situation on the road. At home, it's never going to come to fruition. So use Helsley in the ninth inning and just try to get 2 extra innings rather than give something up. Or in theory, at home, you get to the bottom half of the ninth and maybe you can win it there. And that was the way we saw Ollie handle things in that Angels series. It comes back to bite you in so much as you lost the game, just not necessarily that you lost because of those decisions, but you're aggressive in those spots. Here, it wasn't as aggressive of a decision, but you can play it out either way, and it's going to be one of those things where the result is going to be what's judged, even if the process was sound. I think the process is we've seen a lot of 10th innings this season with the Cardinals having a reliever who's not Ryan Helsley out there, and when that's been the case, it's been a rarity that the Cardinals have been able to get through that situation, and so you have your best strikeout pitcher available for that spot. Fernandez, though, to me, just has not really had the start to the season that really instills the level of confidence that you would have had in him, say, in the middle of last year when he was really cruising, that you think you're going to be able to get through that spot in the lineup. If anything, for me, it's the spot in the order that maybe would have dictated Helsley. And I heard your dad say on the broadcast, it was either going to be Fernandez in a tie, Helsley if the Cardinals could take the lead. And I sat there and thought, I think that is what they're going to do. I would have probably preferred to see Helsley as well this time, simply because I know what's coming up. I know it's Lindor. I know it's Soto and Alonso. That's the murderer's row of the Mets lineup, and they do have other guys that could beat you. Don't get me wrong. But if I have to face that trio with the game on the line, I want it to be with my best pitcher. So the commenters who say, oh, I'm just going to cape for whatever they say. No, in this case, I personally would have gone different. Now, it doesn't mean that Ollie Marmol didn't have his reasons, and we'll get a chance to hear what those were. For me, though, I do think I would have tried to be aggressive again and go Helsley. And look, if you get into a situation in the bottom of the 10th where you give it up because of that, so be it. But this was a case where it just felt like the buzz in the building was telling you, man, they might not get to the 10th inning if you don't find a way to navigate that top of the Mets order with your best arm.
And you feel like the Cardinals, after winning the series against Philadelphia, have now hit the road, lost back-to-back games, need to try and get back on track a little bit. They've struggled on the road. You said 1-7. They get a good Atlanta team coming up next. No, Atlanta's been struggling, but they just won against the Twins with a big inning late in their game at home. So you don't want to allow them to start building up some momentum ahead of that 3-game set. We'll see how the Cardinals react to that. But there's a little bit more that you should react to here on STL Sports Hub. It's all to do with DraftKings. Baseball season is officially underway, and it's time to step up to the plate with DraftKings Pick 6. Think of DraftKings Pick 6 as your fastball right down the middle. It's the easiest way to play for cash and take a shot at a big win. Just select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. Pick 6 is available in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Missouri, and more. Cash in your baseball knowledge. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. You want to download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play. $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
So tomorrow is going to be Game 3 at Citi Field, and I think that just as much as the team playing on the field, the environment in that ballpark was as much a factor tonight against the Cardinals. It's difficult to play a tie game at that ballpark with 39,000, almost 40,000 people screaming their heads off. So, I think that we have to include that as a variable for this team. But, excuses are only good for about two things. When your dog ate your homework and maybe one other situation, but not tonight.
Not this one, right?
No, not tonight. And it's a really, really interesting time for the Cardinals to try and get back on track. But losses in April are not the same as losses in August and September. We both know that. However, I think these back-to-back losses, especially on the road, are starting to make you wonder a little bit how this team is going to bounce back when they have to take a voyage away from Busch Stadium.
Yeah, and I think they've got a response in them, but like I said, it's going to be difficult. And it felt that way coming into this series when you looked at the way that the Mets stacked up their pitching. And Bad Mike here mentions this was not a tip your cap night. This was you had a chance to win and didn't. And so in that case, it's like it was bad and you should feel bad. And I kind of think there is some merit to that. The Cardinals can have some where you tip your cap, but it feels like maybe last night you tip your cap to Griffin Canning because he struck you out 8 times and he just had a good fastball and you couldn't catch up to it, whatever the case would be. David Peterson's had a really good run going back to the middle of last season. He's done a nice job for the Mets rotation. But at a certain point, you were close enough in this game, and they struck out a bunch against him tonight too, but they were close enough in this game and got some of those big swings, but they weren't able to compile them one after the next. When Donovan hits that homer, they got to find a way to probably mount something else there. And when they don't, you're playing with fire with Fernandez. His ERA now is 9, and it's one of those things where you got to have the depth of your bullpen to be able to handle situations like this. But also, you did have Ryan Helsley sitting there, and I get wanting to save him. I understand the impetus behind it, but I also look at it and feel he's not going to pitch at all tonight, and the Cardinals are going to have that L. Now, you don't know you're going to be in a safe situation tomorrow. You may not be in it Sunday, and I think Helsley was rested enough to be able to handle the spot. It's just one of those, I think it does go back to damned if you do, damned if you don't, because I don't think that there is always a 100% right way to go with it. But that one was a gut feel of, I don't know, Fernandez has been looking a little bit rough this year in terms of relative to what he was last year when he was so lights out in that setup role. And so you're trying to weigh out those options as you go in a pressure cooker of a game. Certainly, you mentioned the atmosphere at Citi Field, which I do believe is pretty relevant to this conversation. And then you look at, too, I think lost in this a little bit, Phil Maton comes in and gets a big out, but when he comes back out for the next inning, that's another guy in your bullpen that's been so reliable, but tonight gives up his first run of the season. And of course it comes against the Mets. And of course it comes after the New York Post has the little interview and article with him that came out where he said, it's revenge tour against the 29 other teams that didn't sign him. That's one of those things, especially when you're in that New York media market, Stefan, that the optics of it do not look great. It doesn't mean that Phil Maton isn't going to continue to be a really helpful pitcher for that Cardinal bullpen. But tonight was one of those where you really, really, really wished he would have not given up the runs because it could have been a completely different circumstance late.
Yeah, a couple of numbers that are important to look at for the Cardinals and for the Mets, and I think they really tell the story of this game. For the Cardinals on offense, 15 strikeouts, 0 walks. Saw them plenty of times coming up to the plate, getting ahead in the count, and then we're taking swings on 2-0, 3-1, and popping out or grounding out, not taking their walks. Mets walked 4 times and struck out twice. So that's a pretty big difference between these two teams. Those extra base runners, especially in a one-run game, are extremely important. And the Mets, unfortunately, much to the chagrin of Cardinals fans, ended up winning this game 5-4. But I don't think we've seen this team strike out 15 times in a game. I know the Braves struck out 19 times the other day, but 15 times, that is uncharacteristic of the Cardinals in the year 2025.
Yeah, I mean, at least prior to the last couple of days, whereas, you're up in the double digits there yesterday and then another such outing tonight. I want to see how Brant Brown gets these guys to respond because we've been giving a lot of credit to the Cardinal hitting coach in the early going. And I'm seeing a lot of the frustrated comments about the offense. And I agree with them. Like Stefan and I talking off air going, you got to find a way to get to that 5-run mark if you're going to be able to win many of these games. And they got to 4, they got on the doorstep, and then they weren't able to get over that hump. It's absolutely valid. It's true. But I also have to reckon with 8th in MLB in slug this year, 5th in MLB in on-base percentage. Stefan, they're 2nd in MLB in batting average. So it's not that they're not having some positive signs, but it really feels a little bit yuckier when you can point to those stats and say, as an offense, like the numbers don't bear out this level of disappointment that we have right now in the way these recent games have gone. But the record is the record. Like, you can't hide from that at a certain point. So it is a tricky spot, and I don't necessarily have an answer other than the Cardinals are going to have to forge through. And you're right. I don't know whether you can split the series at this point. I said coming into the 4-gamer, split it. Like, that would be a win in my book. To do it, now you're going to have to beat Kodai Senga and Clay Holmes, who's been a really good converted reliever into a starting pitcher. And you're going to have to do it with that offense, finding a way to break through and take some of those better ABs that we had seen, because you don't want to be striking out 15 times. I understand the good pitchers on the other side, but every team's got good pitchers. You got to be the good hitters that find a way to take some smoother at-bats and grind them out to avoid the type of result that we ended up seeing tonight, which, again, 4 runs, got close. 15 strikeouts won't cut the mustard. You got to find a way to get on base and scratch and claw a little bit more.
And every aspect of this offense for the Cardinals has been consistent outside of the run-scoring aspect. You've seen a lot of hits in virtually every game. You've seen a lot of contact. You've typically seen a fair amount of walks and a low amount of strikeouts, but the run scoring has not been as consistent as maybe some would like it to be. Now, tomorrow, you mentioned Matthew Liberatore versus Kodai Senga. Liberatore 1-1, 3.93 ERA. Had a great start, 6 shutout innings on April 13th against the Phillies. Kodai Senga is going to do him one better. 7 innings of shutout ball against the Athletics at Sutter Health Park, which has been known to be a hitter's park. So he is rolling a little bit with a 2-1 record and a 1.06 ERA. What do you see from this matchup tomorrow?
You know, I'm excited to see what Libby does with this lineup. Obviously, the matchup against the lefty Juan Soto will be interesting, but there's tough righties in there like Pete Alonso, and we know Francisco Lindor has been the thorn in the side for 2 games in a row, and I don't necessarily think that's going away tomorrow. So I'm going to be very intrigued to see what Libby's able to do, an afternoon game, and we know that Citi Field's going to be rocking on the weekend. Cardinals got to find a way to get through one, and it'd be nice if they're able to put up some crooked numbers against Senga. I'm trying to think back, Stefan, as to I believe they might have had a successful outing against him last year. It just, off the top of my head, I'll have to kind of look up some of those stats, but just finding a way to grind through against a guy like that, it's easier said than done, but there is a little bit of experience there where you've seen him before. You kind of know what to expect, and the guys are just going to have to try to roll through and make. Sometimes you got to make something out of nothing, and that can involve taking your walks. That can involve manufacturing runs. They did a little bit of it today, but when the Mets have the ability to leave the ballpark the way that they did tonight too, it's going to take a little bit more than a little bit.
Yeah, and Senga is 1-1 with a 3.29 ERA against the Cardinals in 2 appearances. He has 13 strikeouts over those 2 games. So he's going to be hunting that swing and miss. And Matthew Liberatore in 3 appearances has a 7 ERA against the Mets. So hopefully he can purge some demons a little bit against the mighty Metropolitans, and they can beat the Mets, step right up and kill the Mets, as my grandfather would have said when the Braves went into town. As you know, the Meet the Mets song, but the Mets have certainly met the Cardinals in every aspect of the game over the last 2 nights at Citi Field. I'd like to get to some of these comments, see what people are thinking. The ultimate positive signs are only wins. So
that's what people want, right?
I can understand that. I mean, I totally understand that perspective, right? We can say silver lining after silver lining, but the most important thing in the game of baseball, especially during the regular season, is getting those wins, stacking those wins, especially when you look across the aisle and see what the Cubs did against the Diamondbacks today, scrapping out a huge win at Wrigley Field. So I understand the frustration from the fans. I think that nobody's more frustrated than the guys in that clubhouse after the effort that they put forth toward the end of the game, but hopefully it motivates them the rest of the road trip.
Yeah, I agree with that. And here's a comment from Birds fans. And this is kind of how I feel, and maybe it's something that, Ollie Marmol reflects upon, because I'm sure all of these things are going through his head, but he mentions, I'm normally against using Helsley in a tie game in the bottom of the 9th, which standard protocol for your closer, you probably wouldn't, but why don't we use him against 1, 2, 3 in the order? That would have been what would have changed my mind on it, Stefan. Like, if you get to the 10th inning, obviously then it's going to be Helsley, but knowing the spot in the order that's the most dangerous, and with the way that Fernandez, again, it's not just like tonight was his only rough spot. He's got a 9 ERA for the season. So there have been other games that just haven't been quite right for Fernandez. I would have gone with the other Ryan, and I understand a lot of folks in the comments feel that way as well. And I'm saying it. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I see the comments of, well, you guys are just going to sugarcoat. I'm saying I think I would have gone a different direction. Sometimes people get a little bit lost and say, well, that means we have to burn the manager at the stake because he did a decision that I don't agree with. That's not necessarily the case either. However, the frustration is valid. This is a Cardinals team that, despite all the great glowing stats I can read off, even when it comes to runners in scoring position batting average, which was a bugaboo last year, they're 5th in MLB in batting average with runners in scoring position. Off the top of my head, though, I can think of 3 or 4 or 5 times where they've gotten a hit with wrist and a run didn't even score. So those are the nuanced factors of this where you can read off all the stats and say, hey, things are going okay. The record is what matters the most, and I don't think there's anybody that would tell you that more bluntly than Oliver Marmol. He's aware of it. His team's aware of it. But right now, as we're sitting on the outside trying to make sense of this thing, that's obviously what people are looking at, and rightfully so. They're going to have to fix it and address it. You're getting more consistent pitching. I do think that's been a trend over the last couple of weeks. However, Samuel says 4 2/3 innings. That's a start. I do think it's a valid conversation, Stefan, where you mentioned Mikolas was better tonight, and he was. But he's not trusted to get through that spot in the order, which I agreed with. I believe it was John King that came in for the lefty winker. It's one of those deals where you have to have the kid gloves a little bit with Miles Mikolas, is the way they're choosing to do it. I don't really think we disagree with that because of the fact that Miles Mikolas has had a rough go of things when he gets through that third time through the order. But it can be a limiting factor when you're managing a pitching staff that includes a player where you go, I'm going to have to be ready to maybe make a different decision when we get in there, and you dip into your bullpen a little bit earlier. It's just one of those things where, again, everybody thinks they've got the right answer. Michael McGreevy's the right answer. Okay, maybe he is, and I think at some point in time we're going to see him. It's just one of those deals, though, where if Miles Mikolas has given them 5 innings and 2 runs, 4 2/3 and 2 runs, 5 and 3 runs, and he's your number 6 starter, and everybody else is being more consistent than that, I think you can live with that, Stefan, but not without an offense that, is not finding a way to carry you. You've got to be carried by the offense if that's what your rotation looks like. And so whether that's fair or not, I do think it places a little bit more of the burden on the bats to be able to go above and beyond whatever the expectations are. If that's a rotation, even last night, Palante, 6 and 4, that plays, you can win with that, but only if the offense is robust. If that's the blueprint, you've got to find a way to get more runs to be able to win some of these games.
And we go back to that magic number. We've talked about it over and over again, 5 or 6 runs. It feels like if they hit that number, 5,
yep.
Even 5. I mean, 6 feels a little bit generous to what this team might need. But
and that's hard to do too, by the way. It's hard to score 6 runs.
Absolutely.
Not every team's doing it.
In fact, they were averaging 5. It's a credit to this team. But going back to Mikolas, right? I think we look at Mikolas especially as one of these pitchers that is able to eat innings, whether it was great, good, bad, or ugly over the last few years. He's a guy that has hovered around 200 innings pitched per season. I think that's been the biggest concern, is how deep can he get into games? Now that you've moved into a 6-man rotation, you don't have Steven Matz to come out of the pen to eat up 2 or 3 innings and turn it over to the rest of your bullpen. I'm interested to see how this Cardinals team responds when you get Mason Wynn back, when you get Ivan Herrera back, because they're playing shorthanded. No way you can look at this team and not say that they're playing shorthanded. They're absolutely playing without some of their major weapons, both defensively and offensively, and they're only 2 games under 500. So, they somehow escaped this trip at 500, maybe a game or 2 under. Look, it's not going to kill them. It's not going to kill this team. The real question is, how much momentum do the Cubs build and the Brewers build over the next week or so? Because I think that this team can really surprise some people, but they are shorthanded, and it's tough to win shorthanded in this league.
And they're shorthanded for now by design when it comes to the 6-man rotation in particular, because it's not because of an injury that you lose that roster spot. It's that guy's in the rotation now, so you're going to have 1 fewer arm. And Ray mentions that most starters in the league only go 5 innings, and that's true. Tonight, Mikolas was 1 out short of that. It's not the biggest deal in the world, especially when that's a lefty that has had really good numbers against Miles. So they took him out and they got out of the inning, and there was no further damage done. Like, that's the way that it's designed to go. But I do think it's worth mentioning that, yes, while that's been a trend in MLB, that most starters only go 5, when you make the decision to have a 6-man rotation, the onus is on all 6 of them to be able to go a little bit above and beyond whenever they possibly can, because you have fewer guys out and able to cover in the bullpen, just based on the roster construction of it. I'm not saying it's the wrong call. We can go through the schedule and say, look, the Cardinals are one of the teams that has kept their starters to this point healthy through April. A lot of teams aren't able to say that same thing, and they're hoping that by ramping these guys up slowly and getting them through this stretch where you don't have but 1 off day between now and early May, as it were, You're finding ways to keep guys fresh, and that's going to be the 6-man rotation, and it's going to probably be temporary after the Thursday off days return. When you get into May the 8th or whatever that date is, you look at it a little bit differently. But yeah, the onus is on those guys now to be able to cover because of the situation. And this is getting a little bit precarious because right now you had Mikolas go 4 2/3. Last night, Palante able to go 6. And so because you're still getting that relatively steady drumbeat of 5-6 at a minimum, you just can't have the start where somebody gets blown up. But it would be a shame for that to happen this weekend. If one of these starts happen where you go, oh boy, it's truly like Mikolas in Boston, because then the rotation feels like it's kind of falling out of sorts. And then the bullpen is going to be out of sorts because of the coverage that'll need to happen. All the while you're hoping to find the offense back. Like it's a precarious little house of cards right now where the Cardinals aren't in a terrible spot. They're not in a great spot, a couple of games below 500, but they're within striking distance if they can start a turnaround, Stefan, but it's not a guarantee. They had a period of time a week ago or so where everything seemed to be working in conjunction with one another. And now all the parts of the roster are just a little bit of a touch off where you're trying to find that synergy.
Yeah, this is a team right now that can't afford to be a touch off. It feels like in certain points in the game, they need to play perfectly in order to get things to go the way that they want to. Now, we've seen some activity on the Memphis Expressway. We've seen the bullpen in particular changing, being sort of fluid, which we expected a little bit. Rodri Munoz coming up and then Matt Swanson replacing him. I think it's something that's going to need to happen, especially with a 6-man rotation, which is good because it gives you an idea of what you have, not only at the minor league level, but at the major league level as well, because that's what this year is first and foremost about. It's an audit of your players. I think it gets lost maybe in translation when we talk about this, that relievers are also players that we need to keep our eye on as well. Not just Donovan, not just Gorman, not just Walker, Scott, whoever it may be. There are other players that need to be evaluated for what their role will be for years to come. And I think that this 6-man rotation is going to provide a lot of opportunities for those players.
Yeah, and we're going to see what they're made of for sure over the next couple of weeks. And that's true of every area of the roster. I like that term in terms of an audit, which is ongoing throughout the summer. And yeah, maybe they get a little bit of a boost when Mason Wynn comes back, but it's going to have to be the guys that are out there doing it, right? You're not going to be able to control all the injuries and the timing of such injuries. And they do have enough depth. Guys like JC are here to fill in. They've got an opportunity still, I think, to make a little bit of a run and get back to 500. It's just easy to see it going the other way if they don't fix some of the small things that are getting away from them in the margins right now. But we can mention with Ray's question here, Walker's progress defensively this season. Can we be happy about that? He's actually looked better defensively than offensively, if I may, Stefan. Like some of the struggles are kind of coming back into his game at the plate where you'd like to see a little bit of consistency. He did have an RBI base hit tonight where they were able to move the runner Donovan and then score him on the next one. So you're seeing some good things, but I would say Walker's defense has been one of the bright spots of the young season. Nobody wants to hear about it because everybody right now is frustrated by the loss. And like I said, they should be. I'm the one that titled the video, "It's a Heartbreaking Loss," because it was, but it's one of those things where we're evaluating a lot of different things at once. So, we'll just kind of have to take it as it comes.
And we'll take it as it comes for the next few days as the Cardinals continue their road trip, the Tour de NL East, as I have called it. They've lost game 2 to the Mets. They'll play tomorrow in the afternoon. It's going to be a big one, Liberatore versus Senga. Hopefully the Cardinals can get back on track. Interesting question. Thoughts on the apathy with this team that seem to be continuing to grow for many? I'll let you handle this, partner.
Yeah.
This is an interesting question.
It's a tough one. I mean, and I don't disagree with it. I'll be honest with you. I've been doing YouTube shows, whether it's on my own YouTube channel or now with Sports Hub STL. I've been doing this for the last couple of seasons. And obviously, those have been seasons in which the Cardinals have not ultimately reached the postseason. But there was sort of this mentality of, all right, we need a conclusion here. We need to understand what's going on with the front office. What's the direction of the organization? And then at the end of 2024, when the Cardinals fell short of their goals, they put it out there and said, you know what, payroll's going to go down. We're going to try to reset the foundation for the future. We're going to invest in infrastructure in the minors. And by the way, this guy named Chaim Bloom is going to be coming in and taking things over, but not yet. And so that kind of stirred, I think, the angst for a lot of folks, Stefan, where people thought Mo should have been gone already. And Mo Zalak is very self-referential about that fact, where he even made the joke on opening day and said, if I were to make a speech out there, I know what it would be. It would be, I'm leaving. Y'all should be happy. Like, this is your last year with me. Like, he's At this point, he can't hide from that. He understands that there's frustration in the Cardinals fan base. I might be one of the few that sees the vision a little bit in terms of, remember Chaim Bloom in Boston? Chaim Bloom took over Boston, was supposed to remake their farm system, was supposed to get them back to winning ways. And, oh, yeah, John Henry, they wanted it to happen on a little bit of a cheaper budget and not as high of a payroll. And so they take a step back. He has to trade Mookie Betts. All these things are happening. And then what takes place? Well, the Red Sox have some success, but not enough success. And after a few short years, Chaim Bloom is let go because that's a tough market and the expectations weren't being met. But now what's happening? A farm system largely built by Chaim Bloom's tenure there is thriving. The Red Sox are on the way up, and they have one of the top minor league systems in baseball. So as I look at what the Cardinals are doing, I understand there is frustration with the last few years, and it's valid, right? The Cardinals had consistently asked fans for patience, and then when that patience was basically never delivered upon, they said, well, we're going to have the guy stick around one more year that's kind of been the figurehead and at the helm of this operation. Okay, but they did lay out a succession plan, and they did start at the very bottom. This year, in the past season, Chaim Bloom has been working to fix the minor league infrastructure, which I think had gone by the wayside. It had not been a bright spot of the organization that it once was. And so Chaim Bloom's somebody that can come in from the outside and say, we need to do this, 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 and this. I need to hire him, and him. I need to make these moves to be able to set us up for future success. I do applaud the Cardinals on allowing him to do that for 2 years, and then he's going to be able to take over the operation next year. And that's why I'm okay with not saying, hey, here's the keys, do it all at once. Stefan, I honestly look to Boston as a reason that maybe that's a cautionary tale. Not necessarily for anything in particular, because the Red Sox are going to be okay at the end of the day. They've got the farm system built up. But I think allowing Chaim Bloom to be able to build up the farm system and put in place what's needed there, and then be able to step into John Mozeliak's shoes come this offseason and start to make some of the roster decisions at the big league level, might allow for a little bit of a smoother transition in him having the success that he needs. But to the question of Tyler here, what did that lead to? I do think it might be something that led to some apathy with the Cardinal fan base. And I say this as somebody, as I begun with this little diatribe, I've been doing the YouTube shows for 2 or 3 years now. There is less interest right now from Cardinals fans in what's going on. And so we're trying to make sure we stay at the heart of what you guys are talking about. But at a certain point, this is going to be a season where you're going to have to let the chips fall. You're going to have to see what some of the young players are capable of doing. And I think the quicker that the Cardinals transition to something of that ilk, Stefan, maybe the apathy starts to go away a little bit. But you do have the Victor Scotts of the world. You do have guys like Jordan Walker that we're going to see sink or swim this year. You have some of those players like Matthew Liberatore that have been given an opportunity. So I see the frustration. It's valid. We're frustrated watching it because it's not always the most compelling brand of baseball when the team we're watching consistently drops these one-run games. But at the same time, this is the St. Louis Cardinals in 2025, and I frankly don't think there has been a more interesting summer to cover this team because of all the various different directions it could go down the line. So, Tyler, that's a long answer to your question, but that is really how I view it. There's apathy there because it's not immediate. No heads rolled as a result of what Cardinals fans were seeing. And sometimes that's frustration because you build up, and you say, I'm at least going to get the payoff. And then for a lot of people, the payoff might have been somebody getting fired. That hasn't happened. But I don't necessarily believe that the Cardinals are in a worse place long-term because of it. But it is going to be one of those summers where we're going to be riding the roller coaster a little bit. And I'm not kind of letting go of the possibility that this does end up being a summer where they lose quite a few more games than they win. I think that should be a disappointment if it happens, because what it would entail if it does go down that way, and I'm somebody who predicted a winning record at the beginning of the season, so it's not that I've always felt this way. It goes down that way because the core of players that you have right now was not quite as good as you hoped it was, and that might end up being a bitter pill to swallow as well for the Cardinals. So it's going to inform a lot of what their decisions are moving forward, Stefan. If that results in fan apathy right now, that's something that ownership really does have to be paying attention to, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, it is going to be what informs the next 2 to 3 to 5 years of the organization and how they move forward with decisions. So for me, still a very interesting summer to cover and follow this team. It just may not be in the way that fans are used to seeing. That's a long answer, Stefan, but I felt like that is kind of getting to the heart of the question that Tyler posed there.
Well, I don't think there's any more to say than that. I think that this team is exciting in their own interesting way. You never know what you're going to see on a nightly basis. And I know that that can be frustrating for some fans. But the reality of it is that you do have good pieces there. This is a team in a state of flux. This is a team that has a lot of players that aren't necessarily getting every single day at bats because of the way that this roster is constructed. But this is the right roster. I think we can agree on that. This is the right roster. There are a lot of players on this team that have been able to contribute in certain moments this season. I'm sure there's a lot of arguing that could be done about the point that I'm making. But, it's so far there has not been an egregious spot in this roster, in my eyes, that was easily transferable to either AAA or to DFA, whatever you want to call it.
I actually agree with you. Like, the Mikolas spot is going to continue to be talked about. And it's tricky because you look out tonight and say, well, 4 2/3, 2 runs. That's not otherworldly, but it didn't kill you. It's not the reason that they lost this game. And for an ERA perspective, it's, 4. Like, if Miles Mikolas finishes with a 4 ERA, that's about what you might hope to see from him. So it's one of those where, like, people want to be mad about tonight. You can be. Be mad that Ryan Fernandez gave up a home run. It sucked that you didn't want to see that happen. Totally get it. But it's like the angst of Miles Mikolas. Have angst for Miles Mikolas when he gives up 6 runs. It's probably going to happen again. You may not have to wait that long for it, and then it's a reasonable thing to be mad about. The last 2 starts, we've seen Miles Mikolas keep the Cardinals in games, and the offense in both of those games has not been able to get over the hump. Or in this case, the bullpen was not able to be sterling. But even the best bullpens in baseball are going to have ERAs of 2.1. They're not going to have an ERA of 0. And so inevitably, you're going to give up some runs as a bullpen, but it's about the timing of when those runs come. When Roddery Munoz gives up a 3-run homer in an 8-0 game, the Cardinals win 8-3. Nobody gives a darn. It works out. Tonight, you probably didn't want to give up those runs in the spots that you did if you're Phil Maton or if you're Ryan Fernandez. That's the name of the game, and this is the big leagues, man. A la Tim McCarver. Like, it is. At the end of the day, they've got to find a way to win more of these games, or people are going to be pretty frustrated with the way that things go. And this was a kick in the you-know-what to lose this game tonight the way that they did. We'll see if that continues to be more apathy. Sean mentions that the apathy comes from multiple seasons of losing. Still early, but this is a trend. Well, they didn't lose last year. They won 83 games. They didn't make the playoffs, and that was the goal. So relative to their goals, yes, they have fallen short 100%. But I also agree with Ray, who says, imagine if they had sold off veterans and lost 100 games. I feel like people's apathy would be through the roof, and ownership knew that too. And so they said, we're going to try to be a little creative with straddling the line. And if at a certain point they decide they need to go in the other direction to really just give a look to the future, maybe they'll end up doing that. But for the time being, it is one of those things that, we're all kind of holding on to the edge of our seat to see which direction this thing may go. And if it goes in a bad direction, that apathy conversation is one that unfortunately is going to become more and more real as time goes on, in my opinion. I just think that's inevitable.
It may just be easier to be apathetic when you're familiar with a team that has won the second most World Series titles than the second most World Series title in all of baseball. So it's interesting to talk about. Not a rebuild when you have Contreras, Nolan, and Gray on the roster.
It's not a rebuild. I would agree.
It isn't a rebuild, and I think
Nobody
that's
called it one.
They have not called it a rebuild. That hasn't been the conversation around the clubhouse. It's a refresh. It's an audit. It's certainly something that again, this team had some plans. Yes, did they plan on trading Arenado? Yeah, that was a plan during the offseason. Did it come to fruition? No. But
the Cardinals they'd have 3 more losses right now if they had traded Arenado. With all the plays defensively that he has made. Like, it is what it is.
Yeah. And I think that it's certainly an interesting team this season. But the Cardinals dropped this game 5-4. They've got another one tomorrow afternoon. I certainly hope that they can bounce back and get back to a game under 500. Maybe a much more fun conversation will await tomorrow, but I thought that we had a great dialogue about this one. And the Cardinals, once again, drop game number 2. Brenden, any final thoughts?
Yeah, final thoughts. I'll dive back in on Paul's comment here. This notion of excuses. I think excuses and explanations end up getting conflated in a way that folks confuse one for the other. If you'd like for me to admit that the team isn't good, I don't really know what value that serves because I'm not, conceited enough to think that I know the answer to that. I don't know if they're good or not yet. I think that there's talent on this team. I don't know if it's going to collect into a team that can be good this year. If you asked me at the beginning of the year, I said they were going to win like 83 games. I didn't think they'd make the playoffs when the year began. So to sit here 2 games under 500, be like, I'm shocked at what I'm seeing. I'm not necessarily shocked at what I'm seeing. We saw that they didn't make a single move in the offseason other than adding Phil Maton. So I don't think this team's a World Series contender. I don't know anybody who does. I'm looking around and I don't see anyone that said, oh, this team is absolutely going to contend for a World Series this year. It's one of those things where there is a middle ground sometimes. I don't think the Cardinals are the Chicago White Sox of 2024. I don't think they're the Dodgers of 2024 or 2025 either. I think the Cardinals are somewhere in the middle, and the margins are where this team's going to exist, and that's what I think makes it interesting. It's not an excuse to say that I just don't understand that. I push back a little bit. It's not an excuse to tell you that they have the second best batting average in MLB. It's not an excuse to tell you that the St. Louis Cardinals are top 5 in most statistical categories offensively, including somehow batting average with runners in scoring position, which they sucked at last year. None of those things are excuses. They're facts about a team that is also 2 games below 500. That's a fact, too. They have to win more games or Cardinals fans aren't going to be satisfied, and you as a Cardinals fan should demand that level of excellence. No doubt about it. But we're going to talk about this team 162 games this year and the friggin' off days. So just be ready to understand that we're going to dive into a lot of nuanced elements of it. Keep that energy coming if you're frustrated. We'll try to get to it as much as we can when you're respectful. Some of the comments that have been critical, they were respectful, and I put them on the screen. Some of the comments that were critical, but you're using curse words or you're doing other things that I'm not going to put on the screen, you're not going to put them on the screen. That's not me hiding from anything. I will talk about it. I will talk about it as much, if not more, than anybody else in town. This is what you're going to get. We can be real about this team, but we're also going to have to be real about where the Cardinals are at right now. That doesn't mean sugarcoating it, but it does mean having these conversations from time to time.
It was a blast to have this conversation. It is the manner in which the Cardinals lose at times that frustrate fans. Rather
than me fired up.
Right, as you should be. So we'll continue that energy, and hopefully it carries through tomorrow with a Cardinals win. For everybody here at STL Sports Hub, I really, really appreciate you guys tuning in. The only stat that matters is the record. Well, we're hoping that record improves tomorrow, and there's nothing that we've said to the contrary of that point. But Brenden, thanks so much. I'm Stefan Caray. We're signing off. Cardinals drop game 2, 5-4.